Most people do not want to accept what I am going to tell you right now. Your life does not change because you dream, because you write goals, because you repeat affirmations, or try to believe in something better. All of that is surface noise. Reality only adjusts itself to one thing, to what you are inside right now, to your present state of being. If your inner state is, I am still waiting, then reality answers you exactly the same way. Keep waiting. If your inner state is, it has already happened for me, reality begins to align facts to match that inner fact. It is not thoughts that create events. It is the state from which you think that creates events. And if you never learn how to shift your state, your life will remain a copy of yesterday, with the same people, the same money, the same result. You are not living what you want. You are living what you have already accepted as true internally. Reality is not reacting to your wishes, it is reacting to your identity. This is the starting point of reprogramming. Not to fight with the outer world, not to argue with circumstances, not to act against conditions, but to change the internal state from which life reflects itself. The most dangerous illusion people live in is the belief that life is changing because they are doing something on the outside, while inside they remain exactly the same. A person who internally occupies the state of lack may meditate, repeat mantras, listen to lectures, and read spiritual books, but their world remains full of lack because they never left that state. A person who internally occupies the state, I am still becoming, keeps creating a life where nothing is finished and everything is always in process. Reality is a mirror with a delay. It does not reflect the surface noise of your actions. It reflects the state you persist in when you stop performing for yourself. Your relationships reveal your state about worth. Your money reveals your state about permission. Your delays reveal your state about inevitability. You are not punished by life, you are repeated by it. Whatever you keep being, you keep meeting. If you want to know your state, you don't need mysticism. You only need honesty. The shift begins the moment you stop arguing with appearances and start treating your inner state as the only causal point. Nothing external has to change first, not people, not economy, not timing, only state. The state is a silent command to reality. Two people can say the same sentence, I will have it, and one manifests while the other never does, because one speaks from the state where it is assumed, and the other from the state where it is missing. Emotion is the echo of a state. Thought is the narrative of a state, action the consequence of a state. Change the state, and mind follows. The only reason thinking feels like a war is because you are thinking against a state you still inhabit. People wait for proof to relax, but proof arrives only after relaxation into the state. You do not receive what you earn, you receive what you embody. And this is exactly where most people fail without realizing it. They think they have changed the state, when in fact they only visited it for a moment and then returned to the old one. And this single unconscious return erases days, months, sometimes years of intention. And this repetition continues until you finally see what keeps pulling you back into the old identity. The greatest trap in this work is the belief that you have shifted just because you briefly felt inspired, emotional, or convinced. A temporary emotional spike is not a new state. A new state is not something you visit. It is something you live from. You know you have not shifted if you are still checking reality for confirmation. The one who checks is not the one who has. The very act of looking for evidence exposes the state of absence. People think they are persisting, but what they are persisting in is waiting, doubting, comparing, anticipating, and judging, all of which are states of not having. State does not ask when, because when exists only in the state of not yet. State does not ask how, because how is a question for someone who still believes the result is separate from them. State does not negotiate with facts because facts always lag. The state is indifferent to evidence because it recognizes itself as the cause of whatever evidence will appear. When Neville says, "Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled," he does not mean perform a scene. He means adopt the identity from which the wish is not a wish anymore, but a remembered fact. When you assume, you do not hope, you conclude. You do not try, you stand. You do not reach, you occupy. A state has finality. There is no movement inside a state. All inner movement is proof you are not yet in it. And this is why so many never manifest. They never choose a final inner position. They remain in transit and expect life to deliver them while they are still mentally on the way. Life does not deliver to travelers. It delivers to occupiers. A man in the state of wealth does not think like someone on the way to wealth. He interprets, reacts, and assumes from the end. A man in the state of chosen love does not behave like someone waiting to be chosen. He interprets and exists as one who already belongs. The external world does not shape him. He shapes the interpretation of the world according to the identity he inhabits. That interpretation then rewires the timeline without force. Everything downstream of state becomes inevitable because state is causation disguised as being. When you change the state, you change inevitability. That is the mechanism behind miracles, not luck, not timing, not divine exception, but a shift in inevitability through identity. You do not force outcomes, you alter what must eventually be true about you. The future is not something you walk toward. It is something you tune to. You do not chase reality. You select which version will mirror you. People think selection happens in action, but selection happens in assumption. What you assume about yourself is the filter that deletes incompatible futures and locks incompatible ones. You are never manifesting events. You are manifesting versions of yourself for whom certain events are natural. You are not creating outcomes. You are upgrading identity until the outcome matches by necessity. This is why Neville calls imagination the only reality. Not because images cause change by visualizing pictures, but because your inner claim of selfhood is the blueprint from which the world is obliged to obey. State is destiny pressed into the present moment. The reason most people collapse back into the old state is not because the law fails, but because they underestimate how magnetic the familiar identity is. You think you want a new life, but you keep returning to the old state because the old state feels more real than the new one. Familiar pain is more convincing to the nervous system than unfamiliar possibility. The mind would rather stay in a known disappointment than step into an unverified identity. This is why change feels unstable at first, not because it is difficult, but because the nervous system is loyal to repetition. Reality is not repeating. You are. You are feeding the same state with the same interpretations, the same internal tone, the same meaning you assign to what you see. The world is not doing anything to you. It is agreeing with you. The moment you stop agreeing, the mirror loses its script. But most people do not stop agreeing. They keep validating the old identity by narrating the world through it. A poor state interprets delays as proof of lack. A wealthy state interprets delays as irrelevant timing. A rejected state interprets silence as personal failure. A chosen state interprets silence as neutral space. You are not reacting to life. You are reacting to life through the costume you are wearing. Change the costume and the same event turns into something else entirely. This is why the world is not objective. It is obedient to the one you believe yourself to be. Until you abandon the old interpretation, the old state keeps breathing. The state dies the moment you stop narrating reality from its logic. You do not kill a state by force. You starve it by refusing to identify with it one more time. But here is the brutal truth. People keep feeding the old state unconsciously, not through thought, but through self-conclusion, the quiet assumption, this is who I still am. That single silent sentence repeated in identity outweighs 100 affirmations spoken in hope. Identity is heavier than language. Who you are spoken to yourself in silence is stronger than anything you say aloud. This is why manifestation is not about effort. It is about replacement. You do not defeat the old state. You replace it with another. You do not dismantle the old identity. You stop returning to it. The old state cannot survive abandonment. It has no life of its own except the attention you donate to it. And here is the most frightening part. Most people never notice the exact micro moment when they slide back into the old identity. And that invisible return is the single reason their life keeps repeating with surgical precision, again and again, as if it were scripted. The return to the old identity always happens in the same invisible way, not when circumstances appear, but when you silently agree with them. External reality does not pull you back. Your interpretation does. A circumstance is neutral until you decide what it means about you. The moment you assign meaning from the old state, you are back inside it fully. The fall is never in the event. The fall is in the interpretation. This is why two people can face the same delay, the same silence, the same obstacle, and one continues to move from the end while the other collapses back into waiting. It is not life that makes them different. It is the state they occupy while reading life. Reality is not controlling your state. Your state is controlling how you read reality. And whatever you read becomes the seed of the next scene. The mind does not reflect truth. It reflects identity. Identity writes the subtitles of experience before the world speaks. The one who lives from completion reads disappointment as irrelevant noise. The one who lives from absence reads the same event as confirmation. You are not reacting to facts. You are reacting to yourself. Every reaction is self-recognition disguised as a response to life. When Neville says, "There is no one to change but self," he is not speaking poetically. He is stating a technical law, because your interpretation is the only place where reality is constructed. Change the interpreter, and you destroy the old universe instantly. This is why nothing outside has to shift before you do. The script collapses when the reader changes. But people keep trying to change scenes instead of changing the observer who reads them. They run from jobs, from relationships, from cities, from timelines, but they take the same reader with them, and so they recreate the same movie in a different setting. Life does not follow location. It follows identity. You can burn bridges, disappear, start over, pray, relocate, or reinvent your social circle. But if you remain the same reader, the same narrative rewrites itself from scratch. The world is not happening to you. You are happening to the world. The script does not have authority over you. You have authority over interpretation, and interpretation is the birthplace of destiny. That is why true change is invisible at first, not because nothing is happening, but because the change happens at the level that precedes visibility. You change the cause long before the effect emerges. And people doubt during the lag because they forget that mirrors reflect after positioning, not before. You do not wait for a reflection to shift your face. You shift your face, and the reflection catches up. The same is true with state and facts. The delay is not denial. The delay is mechanical alignment. The reason people lose the new state is not because the new state is fragile, but because their loyalty to the old identity is stronger than their loyalty to the result they claim they want. Every time you defend your old story, even silently, you feed it. Every time you explain your past, justify your patterns, blame timing, blame others, blame your upbringing, blame conditions, you are renewing the contract with the old self. That contract is not broken by logic. It is broken by refusal. A state dies when you stop agreeing with it one more time. But very few people endure the discomfort of not returning to what feels familiar. The ego would rather be right about the past than free in the future. It would rather say, "This is who I am because of what happened," than accept that identity is voluntary and can be dropped at will. And this is the doorway most never cross. They never stop narrating from the old wound. They dress their trauma in intellectual language. They call it realism. They call it humility. They call it caution. They call it honesty. But in truth, it is devotion to the same state that keeps reproducing the same life. A man is not trapped by events. He is trapped by identification. The instant he refuses to identify with the old self, even before he knows who the new self is, the old timeline loses jurisdiction. The prison has no walls. It has only agreements. Because the most terrifying truth is this: nothing external is keeping you where you are. The only force that still holds your life in its current shape is the quiet, unconscious decision to remain the same. The moment you understand that nothing external is holding you, the entire structure of your suffering collapses, because all that was ever required was to stop consenting to the identity that produces it. But here is the paradox. Once people realize that they are free to shift at any moment, they do not feel relief. They feel fear, because freedom removes the last excuse. When there is no one to blame, the only remaining truth is that your life is shaped by what you insist on being. Most people are not afraid of failure. They are afraid of losing the right to explain it. Identity is not just familiar, it is protected by justification. That is why people defend their limitations more passionately than their future. They do not protect the truth, they protect the ego's continuity. And until that protective reflex is broken, the state cannot die. You cannot change and defend the old self at the same time. You must choose comfort of explanation or consequence of transformation. You cannot keep your alibi and inherit your future together. One must be sacrificed. The law is brutal in this sense. It gives you exactly what you are willing to be without excuses. When Neville says, "Assumption hardens into fact," he means that the world has no choice but to submit to identity once identity is held without negotiation. Whatever you refuse to negotiate about becomes your fate. You become untouchable to contradictory facts once the state is non-negotiable. But the opposite is also true. As long as you negotiate with the old identity, the universe will continue to mirror it. You are not waiting for change. Change is waiting for you to stop negotiating. The timeline rearranges the moment you stop arguing with the end and start existing as if it is already concluded. This as if is not acting. It is ownership. Ownership is the death of desire. Desire exists only where ownership is absent. The moment you internally conclude that you are the one who has, desire dissolves and life begins to arrange the scene around that conclusion. The world obeys whoever stops asking. Assumption is not pretending, it is closing the case internally. The moment the case is closed within, reality must conform without. The only reason reality has not changed yet is because the case is still open inside you. You are still waiting for proof, still reconsidering, still checking, still fluctuating, still allowing the old identity to have one more vote. A state becomes causal only when it is final. Finality is the substance of manifestation. The universe does not move for the undecided. You are not denied because the desire is too big. You are denied because the identity is still negotiable. The moment you decide who you are without leaving a backdoor to the previous self, life is forced to reorganize. State is law, and law cannot refuse an identity held without retreat. That is why some transformations look miraculous, not because they break the rules, but because they obey them without hesitation. Miracles are simply states held with zero compromise. You do not need time to change identity. You need only to stop returning to the old one. Time is only required for the world to catch up, not for the self to shift. The shift is instantaneous. The evidence is delayed. Those who understand this do not panic during delay, because delay is not danger. Delay is confirmation that the old chain is collapsing and the new structure is loading. Panic is proof you return to the old identity. Calmness is proof you remained in the new one. The emotional tone reveals the state more clearly than the words you speak. If you still fear loss, you are not yet in the state of having. If you still wait, you are not in the state of completion. If you still measure time, you are not at the end. The end has no clock. Identity that is finished does not monitor the process. It witnesses it. And here lies the single most expensive mistake people make. They destroy their own manifestation by returning to the old state for just a few seconds, and they never realize that those few unnoticed seconds are what rewrite their entire fate. The fate of a person is not determined by what they want, hope, pray, or visualize. It is determined by what they return to when nothing is forcing them. Your default state is your destiny. Whatever you habitually fall back into is what your life must continue to mirror. This is why brief moments of belief do not rewrite reality. Only identity that becomes your baseline does. A new state is not proven by intensity, but by consistency. You do not need fiery conviction, you need silent finality. The universe does not require passion, it requires position. When a position is held without reverse gear, the world has no option but to rearrange. This law is impersonal and mercilessly accurate. You are always becoming externally what you are insisting internally. There is no break in causation. The world is not testing you. It is obeying you. All frustration comes from misunderstanding this. People think they are being delayed, but what is really happening is that they are oscillating. They stand in the new state for a moment and then slip back into the old one for a moment, and it is the return that resets everything. 1 minute of returning to the old state can neutralize weeks of imagined end states because state outranks effort. The law does not count hours, it counts identity. And identity is measured not by occasional highs, but by the state you choose after the high fades. That habitual choice is the true author of your life. The world is not against you. It is calibrated to you. Change calibration and reality must follow. The new timeline does not require permission from the old one. It replaces it the instant you stop giving the old identity another vote. This is the quiet violence of assumption. It ends realities by withdrawing identity from them. When you no longer identify with lack, lack loses legal access to you. When you no longer identify with delay, timelines collapse. When you no longer identify with separation, union becomes mandatory. You cannot outwork a state. You can only replace it. You do not conquer the world. You outgrow the self that made it hostile. This is the true meaning of dominion. Not control over circumstances, but control over the only thing that ever controlled them, state. Once the state is changed, the rest of your life becomes a pre-recorded inevitability. You do not need to manage outcomes. You need only to remain the one for whom those outcomes are natural. And if you truly understood this, not as philosophy, but as fact, then you would realize that your future is not waiting to be earned, fought for, or deserved. It is waiting for one single irreversible act, the decision to never again return to the Sioux version of you that could live without it. When the state is no longer reversible, the external world has no autonomy. It is forced into compliance. People think change begins with visible signs, but visible signs are the final stage of a process that was already sealed internally. The moment the identity is replaced, the old reality becomes a dead script awaiting removal. People call it coincidence, alignment, opportunity, destiny, breakthrough. But none of those are causes. They are consequences of a state that has already been accepted as final. Life begins to move like a machine with one instruction: enforce what the state has declared. Things start to exit your life without negotiation. People fall away not because life is cruel, but because they cannot remain in a timeline built for another version of you. Delays shorten, resistance collapses, doors that stayed closed for years unlock as if they were never locked. New information finds you, new people recognize you, resources appear, not because you hunted them, but because you became the version to which they are obligated. The world is not giving you a gift, it is executing a law. Once the state is immovable, probability is rewritten. The outcomes that were once impossible become mandatory because the world cannot withhold what matches the identity you live from. Reality stops arguing the moment you stop doubting. This is why transformations look sudden from the outside, not because they are sudden, but because the inner shift was invisible until the physical world caught up. You are not rewarded for waiting, you are mirrored for concluding. When the new identity is not something you visit, but the place you breathe from, fate does not require permission to change. It obeys like gravity. And this is the part almost no one is prepared for. Once you truly become the one who has, life will begin to erase everything that belonged to the one who didn't. And if you panic during that erasure, you will resurrect the very reality you were, moments away from burying. Before you close this video, do one thing that costs you nothing but changes everything for this channel. Subscribe now, turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter, and leave a comment below. Even one sentence, because your engagement tells the algorithm that this message matters and it pushes it to more people who need to hear it exactly today.